Auburn and Mizzou last week was one of the best games I've ever seen in my entire
It
life.
was so bad.
And both of them looked exceedingly competent the
Mhm.
following week against better opponents.
Yeah, I would think if you are a team that plays Georgia this year, especially I'm looking at you, Tennessee, right now, you should feel pretty confident that you can do something against them because Missouri was gashing them up the middle. So Georgia's defense, while stocked with some very good athletes, I know Jalen Carter limped off at one point on Saturday, but Georgia's defense still has a bunch of very good athletes that are going to play in the NFL. But they are not the cohesive unit that they were last year, where they were just utterly dominant all the time. And the Oregon game looks more and more like the outlier with each game we watch. Now, maybe that changes. Maybe as the season goes along, they gel together, and all of a sudden, by the end of the season, they're dominant again. But if I'm Tennessee, if I'm Kentucky, if I'm Auburn this week, I don't feel like they're invincible by any stretch of the imagination.
So you take what you saw the last 2 weeks with Georgia, and you alter your viewpoint of what you.
If it had happened once, I would have been like, "That's their clunker," but it happened twice.
Right. And I was like thinking too, because I did the college football mock a few weeks ago, and I was talking to, members of the committee, and I was like, how do you guys judge a team that comes out and you could just tell is sleepwalking? They've got, muffed kicks and turnovers
Right.
and their body languages. They don't want to be there.
Georgia was sloppy as
It
hell
was
for
just
a
like,
lot of that game.
those
Yeah.
games. If you're a fan of a powerhouse, you know what they look like. How do you judge that? And the response I got from the playoff committee chair, Boo Corrigan, was that good teams shouldn't look like that. So, like, the committee actually does take this into account as, like, there's no mulligans here, or there's no, if you look like crap, then you are crap for that week.
Right.
And it's like, I agree with that. Like, last week's Kent State game, we spent very little time discussing because it was just like, they didn't care.
They'll bounce back. Kirby will yell at them for a week, but they didn't, and that's where you go,
so that's why we're here.
The rest of the schedule now feels different. Now, they can prove us wrong, as we've demonstrated we're wrong quite a bit, by looking like they looked against Oregon or South Carolina for the next few weeks. Like,
and
if
that's
they do
the
that,
question,
we're going to be right back where we were.
You said they're playing Auburn and Vanderbilt next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Then they play Florida, which, maybe you change.
It's a rivalry game, but they should beat Florida.
But, like, if you look at Tennessee, and let's say Tennessee continues to win, and they're in a very good spot. I mean, they're playing Alabama in 2 weeks, so they probably will have a loss by then. And they're also playing Kentucky before, too. That's a really brutal month for Tennessee, by the way. At home against Alabama, or at LSU, at home against Alabama. Then you get UT Martin in the middle, then Kentucky, Georgia back-to-back. Does Georgia, are they playing that way because they don't respect their opponent and they're sleepwalking, or are they playing that way because they're susceptible to losing to a team that's going to have a big-time atmosphere that will likely be, in the playoff discussion if they only have one loss by that point in time? Like, I have a very hard time parsing those two things.
I think they are a youngish team defensively. Offensively, they're older and more veteran, so there's not a lot of excuses for the way they played offensively for much of Saturday night. Defensively, they're a youngish team of really great athletes that at some point may congeal into a dominant group, but they're not there right now. So we saw that last.
So you don't think this is clunker, or is this warts exposed, or both?
You only get one clunker. Once there's a second one,
you only get up. One. That's a good question. You only get one clunker. Is that true?
I don't know. I've seen some. I'm trying to think of national title teams that I've covered pretty closely, and where their clunkers come. Usually, yeah, you get the one, and usually those teams don't have another one.
So so this was a bona fide clunker tonight.
Georgia,
Missouri.
Kent State was the clunker.
Kent State was not giving a shit. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I never thought about this. Is a very interesting discussion. I don't know that I agree with that.
Okay.
I think that if you don't care, then you're born to not care again. It's a matter of whether or not you're going to get paid for that clunker. Because there's no like you're not going to sit like you don't even believe that
So
like that
you
Mizzou.
think that Georgia just didn't care this week after getting ripped from stem to stern for playing like garbage against Kent State? You think they did? They came out and did not care if they played well or not, and did not respect their opponent.
I think they did not respect their opponent.
See, I find that very difficult to believe after what they did against Kansas. I think they were trying and it wasn't working. And I think that, like I said,
to me, if you think they were
I'm
trying,
Tennessee, Kentucky,
yeah.
Florida, Auburn, that either gives me confidence or it's sort of the Ivan Drago, he's a man, he's not a machine.
But it's funny though, because once they started getting into the situation where they could lose, all of a sudden, literally everything they did started working.
Yeah, yeah, because they're
8
better.
minutes in a quarter.
Yeah, because they're better.
Yeah.
So
you would think that would take over if they were really locked in earlier.
It did take over
earlier.
That's exactly what happened. It took over when it finally did.
I mean, it's an interesting theory. I'm very curious what the listeners think.
Yeah. It will be. This is going to be a very interesting season if this is what we're dealing with.